So, guys, what I want to talk about today is this kind of question that people often have in their minds about private lessons, group lessons, which is better, which is going to be better for you, which one should you go for? And I want to discuss a little bit about this because often people have lots of kind of preconceptions about what private lessons mean, about what group lessons mean. And this is often from kind of past experiences that they've had, or just kind of the general idea that we have just from kind of seeing the way that everybody does stuff, right? And the way that things are always done. So I've got a little presentation here that I've set up. I'm just going to share my screen. So private versus group lessons, I've used the term versus like, one is better than the other. They're going to have a battle and then we're going to, decide which one wins. It's not really as clear cut as that. So I'm going to explain a little bit about that, right? So first of all, no two private teachers are going to be the same, right? So you could have an amazing private teacher who is very, very good at what they do, provides you with everything you need, provides lots of support, gives you lots of kind of additional help, like outside of your lessons, who is generally going to be a really, really good teacher. But, not all private teachers are like that. They vary a lot. Others are more committed. Some are more committed than others. And obviously there's a massive discrepancy in what they charge as well. And that's usually to do with, the more experienced, the better teachers generally feel more comfortable charging more. Somebody who's maybe just starting out will typically charge a lot less because they don't kind of feel confident that they can kind of charge those higher rates, right? So they will vary a lot depending on who that actual private teacher is. And with group lessons, again, often people will have experience of doing things in groups, whether it's group training classes at the gym, it could be football, it could be martial arts. I mean, think about it. A lot of things that we do, we are very often learning in groups or learning with other people. And again, sometimes this can be a great thing. Sometimes you're going to be learning with and around people who are similar to you, similar level to you, have similar goals to you, and that's really, really good. Sometimes the way that the lessons are taught are done in a way that everybody kind of gets some value out of it, and feels like they're progressing. But then, I'm sure we've all been to kind of group learning experiences. I've certainly got some from my past, where you're sitting in a room with 20 other people. Everybody's at kind of like lots of different levels of, whatever it is that you're doing. And, the teacher's only got so much time to get around everybody. So often, and I've certainly had this experience in the past as well, often you can feel, a little bit like you're not being seen, your needs aren't being taken into account. You might have a question that you can't, that you really want to ask that you can't get answered, and there's no room for that in those lessons. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is just because you've had one good or bad experience with a private teacher or one good or bad experience with group learning, that doesn't mean that it's going to transfer over to, whichever private teacher you see next or whichever group teacher you see next. There are actually more important things to consider, in my opinion and in my experience, than, whether you're just looking for private or group lessons, right? There are other factors also that you have to take into account. So I'm going to go through that today. Just move on to my next page here. So let's first of all look at the pros and cons of private lessons. So often, if we think about it, right, music lessons are a little bit unique, because most of the things, and I just mentioned some of these things, but particularly if you think about kids and you think about the activities that they do, right? They go to school, it's in groups. Yeah, well, they normally do. I know they are back at school now, but normally they go to school, they learn with, as part of a class with classmates, right? If they do any extracurricular activities like football, martial arts, acting classes, gymnastics, anything like that, it's generally always done as part of a group, especially when you're a beginner. But and I think this comes from old-fashioned kind of classical instruments like piano and violin, and even solo classical guitar. The typical route would be to get private lessons, so you can really study that instrument with the help of a teacher who was often more of a kind of mentor as well. So back in the old days, people might see their private music teacher 3 or 4 times a week, get really serious about it. So I think because of that, we have this default sense that music lessons are taught privately always, right? And group lessons are somehow inferior, even though we do all of these other things in groups, and the reasons why we do them are exactly the same as why we would take that into music lessons or guitar lessons as well. So the pros, obviously we've got the teacher's undivided attention here, right? So if you learn with a good private teacher, you're going to get their attention for the whole half hour or the whole hour or however long you're learning with them. So any problems or issues that you have, they're going to be right there. They're going to be on it. They're going to be able to kind of help you. And obviously this goes into number 4 here, get your questions answered. So you haven't got anybody else to compete with for that teacher's attention. One thing that a lot of music studios that I see advertising talk about is personalized lessons. Now, personalized lessons are great if you're an advanced player, particularly so you've been through all of the basics, and you maybe want to specialize in something very niche that there really isn't, there aren't enough people to be learning that with. So this is, I'm talking about kind of high level players here, people who've been playing for a long time and they really want to double down on one very kind of specific area of their playing. For most beginners, sure, everybody's going to have their kind of personal reasons why they want to learn guitar, but the core skills, the essential kind of stuff that they need to learn is pretty much the same, right, for most people. The personalized element tends to come in when it comes to things like learning specific songs, right? If you're learning it in a group, the chances are those people in that group aren't going to want to learn exactly the same songs as you, right? So if you've got a private teacher, they can teach you exactly those songs. They can teach you exactly what you want to learn and tailor those lessons exactly to you, right? You haven't got to worry about what anybody else is there for or what they want to do, right? Another pro is the student can learn at their own pace. So yes, there may be some accountability, there may be some practice expectation from the teacher. Hopefully there will be, there may be some goals set, but ultimately if the student turns up to the next lesson having not done any of that practice or not reached those goals, it's not the end of the world, because it's their lesson, there's no one else there. And if they need to, they can just go over what they did the following week with the previous week with the teachers. So this can feel like a big pro for a lot of students and a lot of parents, because that sense of kind of urgency of expectation isn't necessarily there. Private lessons can be much more relaxed and tailored to you. All right, so that's some of the pros. Let's look at the cons. So I talked about this a little while ago here. So private lessons, they do tend to vary wildly, depending on the teacher, how long they've been teaching, how many students they've taught, and what kind of results they've got. You can go from paying anything from £15 an hour up to £200 an hour, right? Depending on who that teacher is. Obviously, the cheaper ones, you really need to be looking at why are they charging that amount of money, right? There's the old "you get what you pay for" adage that comes in here. Although, of course, I'm not saying that every private teacher who charges below average rate is a bad teacher. It's just that they may not have been teaching that long, and they may not have the kind of career and the track record behind them to justify charging higher rates. But in general, most kind of good private teachers will be quite a lot more expensive than group programs, because you are paying for that segment of the teacher's time. So if you're with a teacher for an hour a week, that hour a week is your time, and the teacher can't see anybody else. They can't make any money in any other way in that time. So you are compensating them really for being the only person taking up that segment of their time, right? Another con is that this kind of comes back to personalized lessons here. So personalized lessons can be great in certain situations, as I talked about, but often, and I know this from experience because I've done this myself, your teacher will say, "What do you want to learn?" And then, you will come up with an idea for a song, or, something that you want to learn, but you won't actually know what you need to learn in order for the student to get to that point. And often private students, out of fear of losing students or upsetting them or giving them something that they perceive to be boring or not relevant, will kind of go down that route. They will, just stick to what the student wants to learn, when actually what they need to be learning is perhaps something completely different in order to get them to that point. So very often, a good teacher will know what a student needs to learn, but they, in order to kind of keep that student happy, they may decide to sort of skip over that to get to the kind of fun stuff, right? The songs and the cool stuff and the stuff that students actually want to learn. So they're not always the same thing. Next is little or no accountability. So again, this comes back to student can learn at their own pace. And again, that can be a pro, but the problem with that, and again, I know this from my experience of, my early days of teaching just private students and then teaching in groups. Private students typically make slower progress. Now, this may seem like I'm kind of turning something on its head here, because parents particularly often feel like, well, if their kid is getting the teacher's undivided attention for that hour or that half an hour, then they must be making faster progress. But of course, the progress comes from accountability. The progress comes from practice. Are you or is your child practicing the required amount daily to actually make that progress? And with a private teacher, there is sometimes measurable progress. There is sometimes accountability. But again, it doesn't really impact on anybody. It doesn't impact on the teacher because they're getting paid regardless. And it doesn't really impact on the student in that moment until 6 months or a year later, when they suddenly discover that actually they haven't made very much progress. And the reason for that is not because of the amount of time they've been spending with their teacher. It's because of what they have or haven't been doing in between the lessons. And that's something that I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a little while. And then finally, I've put no experience of playing in front of or with others. Now, for me, this is really important, because the whole reason I started teaching guitar in the first place is because I love the experience of playing music with other people, whether it's, just singing and playing guitar with one other person, or being up on stage with the band, or, what I particularly love, which is supporting our students, when they want to collaborate and play in bands. And it's actually much, much, much harder to do that if you only ever learn privately, because what tends to happen is students can become quite good players technically. But, you know, if they've never played in front of anybody but their guitar teacher and their mum, right? When you then suggest to them, hey, you know, you're a pretty good player. Why don't you, you know, you've just learned this really cool song. Why don't you perform at our next event, or, you know, find some people to play with? You know, they'll look at me like I'm completely insane for even suggesting that, because they've just got no experience of playing in front of anybody else. So, you know, they're feeling quite shy, they're feeling quite kind of underconfident. And a great way of ripping that plaster off right from the start is to have is to start learning and playing with other people while you're still a beginner, because then you know, everybody is kind of coming up at the same level, everybody's getting better and better, and all of those nerves that you feel when you get on stage, of course there is still going to be a bit of that, but because you've been regularly playing not only in front of one teacher but also you know, 3 or 4 other people, you're then more likely to feel comfortable playing in front of your family at home, or even some friends as well. So it kind of snowballs from there, and that is a really, really big one, which I really want you to take seriously, because it's something that we've seen has really helped our students' development over the past few years. All right, let's look at group lessons then. So pros and cons. So pros of group lessons: power of community. So students typically make faster progress when they learn in some kind of group learning program, even if the lessons themselves are private, if they are being supported by their teachers and they're seeing other people learning as well. So, you know, a really, really powerful thing that I've found over the past few years is that you know, you'll see other students also struggling, or they might be overcoming something that you're currently struggling with. Often when you're in private lessons, it can feel very isolating. If you're struggling with something, you can totally feel like that is your problem. That is something that is that only you are struggling with. You know, the only other person you ever see playing is your teacher, who obviously is not struggling because they've been playing for many, many years and done, you know, lots and lots and lots of practice to get to that level. So often people will think, oh well, you know, I've given it a go. I'm obviously not cut out for guitar or piano or whatever it is you're learning, so therefore I'm gonna chuck it in. Whereas when you see other people also struggling with exactly the same things that you are, and it, you know, this is universal, right? Everybody will struggle with forming chords. Everybody will struggle with picking correctly. Everybody will struggle, you know, especially kids initially, with fretting that first note and getting a good sound to come out of it. Playing in time, most of us will struggle with. This is stuff that everybody struggles with. And if you see other people struggling and also overcoming it, it's a great way to stay motivated, because you can look at those people and go, oh, okay, you know, they're it's not just me. This is all part of the process, right? They're having trouble too. And sometimes you can even get some advice from somebody who has just overcome the thing that you're struggling with. Those people are going to be much closer to that than your teacher, who probably doesn't even remember struggling with that in the first place, because they've been playing for so long. Okay, so that is also a really good pro. And then we've got all kinds of things here. I've lumped this all in one. So listening skills, playing in time, patience, level of musicianship not normally achieved in private lessons alone. So it's very hard. Yeah, you can do listening skills with a private teacher. You can play in time with a private teacher. But there are all kinds of things that you get out of learning and playing with others that just increase your general level of musicianship that you can't get in private lessons. And those are just some of them. And then, of course, you know, a lot more fun, especially for kids. So as already talked about. Kids do everything else in groups, right? Why should music lessons be any different? Why should sitting, you know, for an hour with a private music teacher be the only exception when everything else that they're doing is in groups and they're enjoying it and they're making progress? And, you know, it's a lot more fun because they're getting to spend time with other kids as well. And even more so now, of course, as we will be able to start getting together in person again very, very soon. I've just noticed that I put cheaper as a con. Obviously, that should be a pro. Group lessons are typically cheaper. I mean, that could be a pro or a con, depending on how you look at it. And of course, the reason for that is because the teacher's time is divided up, you know, among multiple people now. So it's not just you that is paying for that time. So group lessons can usually be cheaper for most people. Okay. And then I've also put the teacher's undivided attention as a con, because yes, there are great things about having the teacher's undivided attention, but it can also be a hindrance. You know, sometimes, and I've had this experience in my own private lessons, actually, like back when I was learning and having private lessons regularly. The teacher will show you something. You need a bit of time then to sit there and grapple with it and work on it. Sometimes you don't want the teacher to be sitting there staring at you, because that's kind of intimidating, right? While you're, you know, they've just shown you something and now it's your turn to work on it. So sometimes actually you want the teacher to give you a little bit of a break and say, right, okay, I've shown you this. I'm going to give you 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you know, to sit there and you know, work it out. And then obviously if you've got any questions, then you can ask me after that. So the teacher's undivided attention isn't always a good thing. Sometimes people feel really kind of uncomfortable and intimidated by that. They like having a bit of space to work on things and kind of figure things out for themselves. Not getting questions answered is another one. Again, you know, if you're in a big group and that's kind of the only time that you're seeing your teacher, you can often feel frustrated. You might have a burning question going on in your head that you don't, you know, you might feel like it's a bit of a stupid question, or you might, you know, there might just not be time for you to get that question answered in the group. And then of course, you know, the student can feel left behind, so they can feel like they're kind of lagging behind everybody else in the group, or the opposite, they can feel like they're racing ahead and everybody is lagging behind them. So, you know, these are all legitimate concerns here. So that's not the kind of most important thing though. So what I want to bring up here, if you can see this, whether you learn privately or in a group is largely irrelevant. I hope you can see that, because there are more important issues at play. All right. So what is more important? Results, right? So when we learn to do anything, right, we are learning because we have a specific result in our mind. So, you know, when you enroll for guitar lessons, even if you don't realize it yet, you want to play music. That's the result you want, right? Or you want your child to play music. They want to play something that you recognize. You want them to play something that you recognize and that they can perhaps get up on stage and play, or play for other people. You know, it's a really kind of cool thing to see your child doing that. And results can be achieved in multiple ways, right? There's no one right way of doing this. And actually, we now we've kind of identified these the 6 different ingredients, if you like. I did a Facebook Live on this a few weeks ago, that we know are working for our students, right? The students who are making incredible progress and you know, really shooting ahead. It's, you know, and these students are all enrolled in our program, which does include a small private lesson element, but you know, that's not the reason why they're making the progress that they are. Okay, So what is more important is the destination, right? Not how we get there. So here are my 6 little ingredients. I'm not going to go through these in a great deal of detail again, because I did this all a few weeks ago. So set goals. You've got to have clear goals as to why you're learning guitar. You need some kind of a structured method. You need your lessons to be structured, and you need a structured practice routine. Very important. Learn the core skills first. Get support from teachers and other students. Start playing songs as soon as possible and perform on stage. All of our students who are doing well have all of these things in place. All right. So at G4 Guitar, we believe that we provide the best of all worlds. And obviously for the last year, we've been online. We have adapted from being, very much in-person, face-to-face, location-based studio. We were literally just seeing the people who lived within, a 20-30 minute drive from our studio in Croydon. We had a few online bits and pieces, we had a few resources for our students, but obviously, we've really ramped that up over the last year, and we found that the many of the things that we put in place in our online program have been a massive game changer for a lot of our students. So even when we do go back to location-based learning, which we will in some form, we are still going to be keeping some of these online things in place, because we've seen how beneficial they've been to many of our students. So here's a few things that we do, right? Structured method contains measurable goals, so that's our G4 method. Our group learning provides fun and accountability. Support from teachers and our community ensures that students stay on the right track. Private assessment lessons when needed. So yeah, sometimes we find that our students do need the occasional private lesson. There are various reasons why that might be the case, and we are always happy to book a student in for a private lesson if we genuinely feel that that's what they need, and it can't be solved by one of these other things up here, right? So we will do that. Online resources including song sheets, video tutorials, and our student Facebook group, and of course collaborative and performance opportunities. We've been trying to keep up with these online, but I am very, very much looking forward to being able to doing more of this in person over the next few months. So that's also what we provide as well. All right, so I'm just going to stop sharing this for a second here, guys. And what I am going to say kind of in summary, all right, is that a challenge for many musicians, especially beginners, is staying motivated, right? To be a successful guitar player, you need to practice daily for years. This is something a lot of people don't like hearing, right? There's no quick fix. You can do some good stuff within a few months, but to really be a confident, successful guitar player, it's going to take several years, sometimes 3 to 4 years, sometimes longer. I mean, some of our longer term students have been with us for 10 years or more, right? Obviously, for this reason, a high percentage of guitar students quit within the first 6 months. They realize that learning guitar is not as fun or as easy as they thought it would be. So again, they think, well, guitar's not for me. I didn't think it would be this hard, and they quit, right? So how do we stay motivated to practice? The best way is to either build or become involved in a community of local musicians or other guitar players. In our case, it's very much focused towards beginner guitar players, although we do now have players of all different levels. And that's what we're doing, right? So we are seeing our students who learn as part of our program, which does include group learning, right? They generally stay motivated for longer, and they make much faster progress than those we've taught privately. Again, this isn't just me putting this out there. This is from experience, both my own teaching, Mike and Jimmy's teaching, also, other guitar teachers that I speak to. The ones who stick around beyond that first year, right, generally are the ones who learn in groups, at least to start with, because they have that help from the community and that help with their motivation. All right, so often there is an assumption that group lessons are inferior. I do have this conversation often with parents. This is usually born out of, very understandably, this is born out of experience, because, as I said, some group learning experiences that you can do are lacking. They're not all as good as each other, right? But we also have the, you're nervous at the thought of learning with others as well. And as I said earlier, that can be tough to start with, but the sooner you do it, just rip that plaster off, because it's going to be much harder if you don't do it initially. It's going to be much harder to do it later on once you're a good player. So if you come up and you're, at the same time as you're developing your playing skills, you're also developing your confidence and your how comfortable you are playing in front of other people, it's going to be much easier then to to do a small performance in front of your family, or to perform in front of people at school. So several studies done on collaborative learning have proved that people learn better in small groups compared to private lessons. So again, this isn't just from our experience. This has also been borne out by the science. We're a social species, and I think lockdown has kind of proved that to us. We're all desperate to get out and start seeing people and start doing things again. I firmly believe that guitar is a team sport, and collaborative learning is really one of our main advantages. One final thing about groups here: large groups of more than 7 tend to become less effective. So that's why we have a strict limit of 5 students in each of our group. One-to-one lessons may be the norm for other music teachers, and they may have always been the norm throughout history, but they lack that social element that group learning brings, right? And therefore, students who only learn in private lessons, generally miss out on those benefits, and that's why they quit early on. It's not because they need more private lessons, it's actually because they need more interaction, and more kind of help and more kind of support from others. So groups of 5 or fewer are big enough to benefit from the group learning experience, but small enough to work as an effective team as well. When we work together in small groups, we see how other students overcome these challenges, and they can adopt ideas that they've seen others adopt, and even expand on them as well. So you just get a much wider, richer learning experience when you're learning kind of with and from other people. So whether you learn privately or in a group is less important than the following factors. So this is something to think about when you're looking for lessons or looking for a teacher. So do you have clear learning goals? Again, I talked about this a lot. So learn guitar is not a goal. You have to be more specific, whether that's, I want to play a certain song by a certain amount of time, or, even if you have an event or something, some kind of measurable time-based goal and a specific thing you want to achieve is really, really, really important. Do you have a clear learning path in place? So are you learning from a book, a method, a specific course? You don't want to be kind of jumping around all over the place, because you're going to get really, really confused and overwhelmed. Are you practicing regularly? So you should be aiming to practice every day if you possibly can. Little kids only need to do 5-10 minutes. Older kids and adults should be doing 20-30 minutes, something like that, but it's the consistency that's the key. Are you able to ask your child's teacher for help when you need it? So, can you contact your child's teacher outside of the lesson? So you're not waiting, so say your lesson is on a Tuesday, your kid sits down to practice on Wednesday and they have a question. and you're not going to see that teacher again until the following Tuesday. Well, can you contact that teacher in between, right, to ask for clarification? Do you have the opportunity to interact with your teacher and other students outside of lessons? Again, for all of those reasons that I talked about earlier, that support is really, really, really important, especially in those early days, right? So we found that students who learn from a structured method, get support from the community, and access helpful resources are much more likely to stick with their lessons. Again, this is our experience. Once students have been learning for a year, they're far more likely to become long-term players and, of course, reap all of the awesome benefits that comes from playing music. So I hope you found that helpful. I wonder if it's maybe changed any of your preconceptions about, private lessons mean this and group lessons mean that. And obviously, if it has, please do let me know in the comments. If there's anything you disagree with, please also let me know. I'm always happy to to discuss this further. But yeah, that's it for me this week. I hope you all have a lovely weekend, and I will catch up with you soon. Take care.